What's up, sons? It's Blind Run with Son of a Tech once again, and today we're going to talk about Kaspa and why is it pumping. Let's get into why and more details surrounding Kaspa and the upcoming developments surrounding it right after a word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is myself. I recently launched a crypto mining e-course at sonofatech.com, and it includes 9 steps to cover when you decide to start your crypto mining journey. This is specifically pertaining to 2023 crypto mining profits and taking advantage of the down market to achieve skyrocketing growth as we move into the next halving of Bitcoin. You'll learn buying mining equipment in a bear market, using outside investment to speculative mine, begin mining once profit is established, sell mine crypto to pay for electricity, hold and prep for the bull run, sell at the top of the bull market, sell mining equipment at the top of the bull market, and begin investing in land and power so that you can bring in outside investors to utilize excess resources. Thanks everybody for your support, and I hope you enjoy the course. Let me know what you think of it in the comment section below. Welcome back. So you guys probably know that I've been talking about Kaspa since way back in April of 2022. And in September of 2022, we had the move from proof of work to proof of stake for Ethereum, and that left a lot of GPUs in my mining farm, well, unprofitable and unable to mine anything. On the initial move, I had made the plan to move over to Kaspa, my entire farm, and begin mining that. I had already been mining Kaspa on a few select rigs since the very inception back in around December or so of 2021. We started talking about it in April of 2022 as it looked to start getting basically some legs underneath it, getting releases on exchanges, even though they were small, like TextBit and TradeOgre. And the development continued to look promising, especially with the rewrite from Go language into the Rust language. And all of that together is part of the reason why I decided that I thought the project had some legs and growth potential. If you guys are curious, I haven't sold any of my Kaspa, and it is all in a doxed wallet that you can find if you search this channel hard enough in regard to Kaspa as that is concerned. So let's go ahead and talk about what's happening right now. We've had Kaspa just cross the 3 cents range, and that is clearly increasing profitability for mining as well. The problem with mining being, of course, is that we now have FPGAs on the network, which means they operate at a much higher efficiency than GPUs. But this isn't dissimilar from pretty much any other blockchain project that's ever been released, including, of course, Ethereum, where GPUs remained profitable on it, even with the inception of ASICs. So there is potential for Kaspa to remain profitable. And as we've seen on the profitability charts with what to mine and hashrate.no, proves out to still be true due to the lack of availability of FPGAs and due to the increase in price outpacing, of course, this, plus the reduction of the block reward, which we will also talk about. So that means, of course, that we are starting to see, though, a huge increase in the hash rate, which is interpreting into the difficulty on the network. You can see here the price hasn't even really caught up on the coin market cap reading, or not the coin market cap, but the mining pool stats, coin market cap, as you can see, keeping up with the reading here. We almost broke 4 cents at one point today. It has retraced a little bit, and that's to be expected as miners begin to liquidate and so on. That being said, with the increased difficulty over the past couple days, are we still looking at solo mining? For a lot of people that are mining right now, you can tell based on the network hash rates that there is still a lot of solo mining hash rate going around. And you can see that right here where we have 692 terahash a second, which is quite a bit over, what the hash rate of the pools is reading, which is the 579 terahash a second. Even with Go language, there are a lot more blocks and a lot faster of blocks on the Kaspa network, meaning that you have a much higher potential for solo mining. This is why personally I solo mine. And because it incentivizes miners in that way, it also helps to basically decentralize the network way faster than other cryptos in the early stage. This is actually positive news, and that is because the miners are building nodes in their mining farms, which means essentially because the incentive is there to solo mine thanks to the amount of blocks, we are seeing a much higher rate of decentralization as far as nodes go as well for a project that is so early. And this is only good news, of course, for Kaspa. That being said, I have about 25 gigahash a second on Kaspa right now on my local node. And as you can see here, we are basically experiencing blocks still being found. All right, so we have 35 blocks mined so far on this one. If we go to our transaction history just for today, you can see we have 1 and 2 blocks already found today, even though the hash rate is increasing. Yesterday we had 1, 2, and these aren't accepted. We had 2 blocks yesterday. So we're still getting about 2 blocks a day with 25 gigahash a second, which is clearly way better than if we saw this kind of difficulty spike on other coins. Before this, we were getting 3 to 4 blocks. We're still getting 2 blocks. It's much more beneficial to solo mine because you also avoid those fees on the mining pools, which can be upwards of basically 3 cents on, or 3%, excuse me, on a lot of these mining pools. So if you have the capability to solo mine, definitely check out my video on how to solo mine. And that is one thing that makes this project a lot more robust than other projects from a decentralized perspective this early on. It's actually quite impressive. I haven't seen numbers like this on another coin this early on ever, right? Where we have basically a much higher network hash rate than a pool hash rate. And we have basically still, you know, if you read this, 136 terahash a second of solo miners that are not solo mining to pools, right? And that's important. If you're solo mining to a pool, you're still mining to the same node. They just pay you out the full block reward if you find it, which is not as good for decentralization of the network. So I highly encourage you to learn how to solo mine. I'm going to kind of hammer that home, especially because we've provided the information on how to do that. Moving on from there, why did we see the pump in price here over the past couple days? And well, on the 28th, we had a pretty large listing for Kaspa on Hotbit. And this is probably more than likely the kind of spark that lit the fire underneath Kaspa to go up in price as much as it has over the past 48 hours. And it just says here, you know, Hotbit, a renowned digital asset exchange platform, announced the listing of Kaspa on its platform on March 27th, 2023. And they go into, you know, how it was established in 2018, which is a good sign for an exchange because that's during a bear market, where it was founded, which is in Shanghai, and some of its growth numbers, etc. Its base of users is obviously going to increase, of course, the interest in the coin, because once new coins are listed into any larger exchanges, there's going to be an increased amount of interest in there. So that's really what we're looking at. For a lot of you all that are new to Kaspa, let's say you just purchased on Hotbit and you're trying to figure out, you know, is it a scam? Is it not? We have done a video on that previously, kind of covering the pedigree of the developers, the ground up building in nature. Today we covered obviously the big one, which is its consensus mechanism, and its basically ability to scale allows it to actually have a higher decentralization at a very, very low entry point, meaning, like, once again, I'll say it has that because you incentivize the miners to build out their infrastructure in that manner. So it's super positive. Now, there is speculative improvements coming to Kaspa with the rewrite from Go language into Rust. And this is where a lot of people are expecting Kaspa to essentially take off even further than what it is at now. So we have previous cause for the recent pump, and then now we have kind of a future cause for speculation of it going even further. And Kaspa is currently in the development stage of rewriting its Go language programming language to Rust, which is a well-known language for its memory safety and performance. So Kaspa will benefit the blockchain by making it more efficient, operations with tighter performance, and is less prone to memory related issues. Now, if we scroll down, what you'll see is the numbers, which is what we're really interested in. So pushing speeds of up to 32 blocks per second, which they've already tested and has proven out to be true on the testnet, and 6,400 transactions per second, and upwards of 20,000 transactions per second. To give you guys some perspective on this, Visa does 24,000 transactions per second, Ripple does 1,500 transactions per second, and PayPal does a measly 193 transactions per second. That is basically looking at a proof of work layer 1 blockchain that can outperform Visa in transactions per second. This will also increase the amount of blocks that are found per second, meaning that miners will be once again re-incentivized even as the hash rate of the network goes up to still continue to build nodes and solo mine, especially once we see the release and the launch of Rust. And so even if you are like starting to fall off on that solo mining, being able to find blocks, I would expect that actual number to go up as more blocks per second are found. And that will be enabled, of course, by the Rust language. What gets even more interesting here is that I did pull up, some of the other competitors. If we look at EOS, that's 4,000 transactions per second. If we look at Neo, I don't think they actually have it here. It says 15 exchanges each second. But Cardano, 1,000 transactions per second. Solana can process up to 24,000 transactions per second, which is currently the fastest available overall. The common denominator here of all of these coins that we're talking about, though, is that they are proof of stake. And with proof of stake comes basically a decreased amount of decentralization, meaning there's an advantage there for proof of work to having that, a decreased amount of security, and the fastest one available, Solana, has had a ton of network downtime. So if we see a competitive layer 1 proof of work blockchain that is basically competing with Solana, the current fastest one, and has 100% uptime because of its proof of work nature, it's going to make waves. That is just all you really need to know about that at this time. There are other implementations that they're talking about that will come along with this, that will provide more security and so on, like BlockDAG. I did an interview with one of the developers, Shai, who describes this and tells us all the technical details if you want to check out that interview. But suffice to say, BlockDAG will come along with Rust, which will just help improve the network as a whole, and that's going to be important. There is also talks of smart contracts on Kaspa. I don't know where the development of that is so far. I am not as concerned with Kaspa and smart contracts as I am with Kaspa in general and transaction speeds, because I think transaction speeds are really the thing that needs to get solved here, that trilemma, right? And I think once you get closer and closer to that, it's going to be much more interesting to see how the rest of the markets respond to it, right? The next thing is kind of like, is Kaspa still being worked on for Rust, and is it still being developed? And the answer to that is yes. The latest update was on March 3rd from their blog. They did pull, of course, some tweets from the team. Michael Sutton did say, of course, here's the Rust language in action, accepted blocks. You can see here. And kind of says, it doesn't speak for itself. They do have it ready and running, and the node is synced on the live mainnet, which is a huge step forward. And this was only, earlier this month. So it is happening. And we can further confirm that with their GitHub, where we have basically commits being added even 7 hours ago as of today, 3 days ago. Work is being performed on this. And so if you're wanting to get in before a potential pump, obviously the amount of hype that comes behind transaction speeds meeting or exceeding that of a majority of other financial services is going to be a big deal. And I don't ever condone purchasing cryptocurrency because that's not the way I do it. If you want to check out how I do it, check out my crypto mining e-course, which I'll have linked down below. But, you know, if you're looking for a coin that does have potential here, we're in the middle of a bear market and it's absolutely taking off, which is usually not really what you see on these types of projects. But because of the uniqueness of this project, it is starting to catch some eyes pretty quickly. If we take a look at the other thing that's going to be important here for miners is going to be the emission schedule. They have a pretty quick emission schedule. There is a halving that happens every year. However, the interesting thing about this is that not only does it halve over the year, but it does it in increments throughout the year, right? So for example, right now we're at about 246 Kaspa, 247 Kaspa, if rounded up, per block. And that is going to get decreased down to 233. That doesn't mean necessarily that there will be less blocks available though, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out with the Rust implementation and what that math will end up being as far as total emissions, right? We have basically this chromatic emission schedule, and if we're going to severely increase the amount of blocks per second, that would increase the emissions, which could play a factor on price negatively. It really depends on basically how much participation gets driven up with the increase of the blocks per second and all of that, unless I'm misunderstanding that, and then let me know in the comment section below. So those are kind of some of the worries about it potentially going down with the increase of the blocks per second. But kind of the technology wins out here, I think, at the end of the day, and there's a ton of hype behind it. And we will see another cut in reward here on the 7th of April, which is going to be a pretty big deal. We're going to go down from 246 to 233. And so that's about 13 or whatever per, and it'll do that again on May 8th of 2023. So this is kind of the emission schedule. All of this will be linked down below so that you're aware of it and what that schedule looks like and how it's going from that perspective. Kaspa is also working on a community team. As far as communities go, you guys know my opinions on them. Most of the time they're toxic. They don't usually drive adoption based on technology, and there's always concerns about that, distractions for the team. I'm happy to see that the team that is basically working on community development is completely separate from the developers, and we aren't seeing too much of a stray away from the work as can be seen on their GitHub right now with the rewrite into Rust. So as long as that continues on, I really have a good feeling about Kaspa in general. If that narrative starts to shift to where, you know, it's community versus community, and it's like Kaspa versus Kadena right now, which is a kind of a big one coming from Kadena's side, keeps attacking Kaspa for whatever reason. If that really like spins out of control and you start to see the developers tweeting way too much and so on, it is what it is. I tweet less when I'm working more. That's how I operate. I assume a lot of other people operate in the same manner. That being said, I'm also a social media content creator, whatever, whose life bloodline runs off of tweeting because I tweet a lot. So, you know, if it's a developer whose life's bloodline runs on development and programming, then I'm a little bit more concerned about how that may affect them, especially because if you get into too many negative thought patterns towards another project, that negativity comes out in everything, including your work. And I think it's better to just turn that stuff off sometimes if you have a really important project to work on or video to work on, that sort of thing, right? Wrapping up, you know, a lot of people have asked me, you know, is Kaspa a scam, or made that statement. You can check out my video on, you know, is Kaspa a scam? Why I think it's not, based on, once again, the pedigree of the developers and its bottom up kind of work, its grassroots with no pre-mine, all that sort of stuff, which of course also means that the price is usually a little bit slower to pump up because you don't have, you know, a locked away pre-mine set of coins. There are questions around, you know, the amount that some, you know, outside entities were able to mine early on. But I don't see that being a problem moving forward because it still was one of those things where day one when it launched, I was able to mine it just like everybody else. Maybe I didn't have the same amount of equipment, right? But I still was able to do that. And so I don't really have too much to say about that one in particular. Just to have that as a footnote, you can always look up all this information on their wiki. They answer all those questions over there, as well as on my interviews with them, which we have also done earlier in the show. So if you have concerns surrounding that, I've covered them. And I think that's important that we make sure, you call out the red flags, but you also give credit where credit is due. For example, within what's been going on with the rewrite into Rust and how successful it is looking. Price going up in the future, I'm going to say it, not financial advice. My initial projections were to be close because of the amount of emissions. I was projecting it to be close to something like Ravencoin on the previous halving cycle, where we did see that 16 cents mark in the bull run. That's kind of what I was expecting to see with Kaspa as far as its price relations and so on, just because of the high amount of emissions, right? That's kind of how I saw it. Could be completely incorrect as far as that's concerned, but I don't know that that's necessarily true. It could go one way or the other. With enough adoption, it can take care of a lot of the amount of emissions, right? We have high emission coins that still stay pretty steadily closer to $1 per. And if that happens, then amazing. If you are, wanting to come into this looking for the next Dogecoin, understand that the focus isn't the Dogecoin pump, right? You don't have the people going out there like the Doge army and stuff pumping it up based off of just the sheer factor of adoption from retail. This is more, I think, going to be a little bit more grassroots, a little bit slower, that sort of thing. However, it's surprised me recently, right? I wasn't expecting this type of movement. I was expecting, movement along with Bitcoin up until the next halving. And then we would have our traditional, main coin pump and then our altcoin pump. That being said, we are kind of seeing somewhat of an alt season during this bear market, which is odd. And this is also affecting, a lot of other proof of work coins, including Alephium and Dynex, for example, which has also seen a recent pump. So I do think we are experiencing some sort of alt season because Bitcoin stayed around that $28,000 range while the altcoins started pumping up significantly. And if that cycles back to Bitcoin during the bear market, we could see a drop off and a sell off. You also have to worry about a lot of miners selling off to pay for power here. And if that does end up being the case, that can be a driver for the price to go down, which is one of the reasons why you do see a manipulation of monetary policy on other coins. For example, most recently, Flora Chain did just change their emissions from 5 coins to the miner to 3 coins to the miner and 2 coins to a dev pool, or at least made that change proposal. Luckily, I don't think that we're going to see any of that from Kaspa because the emission schedule's been set in stone. And so I don't think that we'll see that kind of manipulation, but that does mean that it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? It does mean that miners that are struggling trying to pay their power bills when you see a pump are going to sell off, and that will bring the price back down. However, because of the efficiency of FPGAs, the power bills are much lower for a lot of these large farms that are making significant amounts of Kaspa, and they may be holding on to this through the bull run, and we'll just have to sit back and wait and see. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hit the like, comment, subscribe down below, and I will see you next Tuesday.